All right. So thank you so much for joining. So this meeting is mainly regarding to discuss about our next phase of roadmap, which is 6 months, which is starting from February. So what we do is we actually discuss our next planned milestones or the features, what we call it as, and then we would actually would like to you to know the each feature or the milestone in detail from us so that it would be helpful for you to give a prioritization for each of the feature. We would be also circulating an Excel sheet as always, so that you can actually add your prioritization to each of the feature and then would add some comment of when would you like to get this feature to be delivered, whether it is within 3 months or whether it's 6 months or beyond that and whatnot. So this meeting is mainly regarding we would be giving you more information on each of the feature, though you might have created that or you are new to it. We would be discussing that in detail today. We have the presentation, and so this is the first part of the presentation, meaning that we do have 90 new milestones in our current backlog. And then we would be discussing the first part, which is like 45. And then in the month of January, before our closure of this particular phase, we would be covering the next 45. So today, me and Andre would be giving you all the details. Feel free to let us know if you have any questions at the end of the session so that we can go back and give you more details about any of the feature which you would like to know more about. So let me go ahead and share my screen and then we will just get started. We will also give you a quick summary of our previous or the current phase, what we are working on, and some admin things as well. So this is more of just to give an update of how and what is going on in this current phase and what is our analytics of the metrics of our open source. As you all know that we do have the weekly technical discussion calls, which is happening every Wednesday at 8 a.m. So we do have 345 members getting invited in that particular meeting. All of them are Guardian community. They are interested to learn and more about Guardian. Then we do have a bi-weekly Thursdays GHG call happening where we invite 43 members as of now. Where we discuss like more of the GHG side of things because we are working on the GHG version 3 methodology. So that is where we discuss more about the GHG side, which is bi-weekly Thursdays. And then talking about the analytics, we do have by mid of November 24th to December 5th, we do have 650 total clones, in which the 256 were the total new visitors in that particular week of span of time. So this is more of what we are doing, some pretty change in our monthly or the weekly tech meeting cadence. So what we are thinking is as we have 4 or 5 weeks in a month, what we would be doing, and instead of we focusing on the tech meet on the technical part of Guardian every week, what we would be doing is we will be splitting the weeks into several different kind of discussions. So in week 1, we would be discussing like non-Asia Pacific, the global technical sync. So it means as we do the daily, weekly tech meet, we would be doing the same thing on the first week of our month. Then second week, we would be more focusing on the APAC, which is the Asia Pacific community, because they are not able to join our 8 a.m. So we would be just transitioning. And as we do have currently the monthly APAC meeting, so we would be doing that in week 2. In week 3, what we would also be doing is as we do the training, we would be focusing more on the training side because we just want to make sure that the community or whatever they have interest on, they want to join in that particular meeting. So week 3 would be our community training sessions where we would be doing the hands-on skills, developments, demos, or any of the current features what we have. And then we would also be do the knowledge sharing of our Guardian features. And in end of the week, end of the month, which is week 4, we would be focusing more on the strategic sessions. Like for example, as was one another thing where they were focusing on the roadmap sessions. In addition to this, we would also be focusing on the operation, the cross ecosystem collaboration. If we have any, we would also give community a chance to demo their use cases if they are working on Guardian or if they have any other things to share with the community so that they have a scope or they have like more of collaboration. And then they can also get some feedback on their use case. So all that would be done in week 4. So that is what we are thinking, just to make sure that we focus on the audience, what they are interested in. So this is what our cadence would be. We would be starting by in the month of January. But if you have any feedback on this, on how to improve our meeting cadence and the audience interests, feel free to please reach out to us on Slack so that we can improve this and make sure that we have the meetings and the weekly meetings more focused on the community as per their interest. Talking about our community methodology plan. So as we did some of the Vera methodologies in this particular phase, we will be focusing more on that side in the coming phases. And again, this is subject to change as we come along and as the partners and the contributors are interested in. But for now, we have planned VM43, VM41, and VM54. This is in our roadmap for the next 6 months. But again, feel free to please let us know if you would like to contribute in any of the other methodologies in the next phase, which is starting February to July. Happy to get your information, happy to get that added in our roadmap and make sure that that has already been added in our Guardian repo by the end of the phase. So now focusing on the current roadmap. So basically, as I said, that we are focusing currently today for the new and evolving work items that advance the platform's technical capability of the use case and the user experience, ecosystem, interoperability. And we would also be focusing on the community-driven development. So these worker items, what you would see now in the later of this presentation, would be more design and improving the policy workflows, automating the critical operations, and it would also be increasing and improving the trust and the transparency, and also enabling the scalable standards aligned solutions across the digital, environmental, and carbon market ecosystem. So before I go to my first topic, I actually would like to give you a summary of our current phase. So what we have actually committed to you in the last phase was these were the worker topics. So you would be able to see this when I circulate this Excel sheet to you. But as you see that what we have done is we have summarized the worker topics over here with all the ticket links of this particular worker topics. And then you would also be able to say the documentation link of that particular feature and the demo link of which of that particular feature. Like, for example, as we do like regular sprint demos, we also do the feature demos. You should be able to see those links in the summary so that you would get to know more in detail about that particular feature of how that is being implemented currently. And if you have any suggestion or feedback to improve that, please feel free to please let us know. But we have started this summarizing the current phase, what we call it as. So if you see there are some missing the documentation link and demo links, which means that we are still working on these because we haven't completed our current phase that will be ending January. But if you are still interested to look at our current or which we have already released it, you would be able to see the documentation link and the demo link in this particular summary of August 2025 to January 2026 sheet. So let's just get started with our next phase milestones, which we would like your feedback and your priority to make sure that if this is important for you, we would be able to add this in our next phase. So I would pass it to Andre, and so that we can just get started with our milestones.
Thank you, Prina. We've got quite a few milestones to go through, so I'll try to do my best to summarize them for you as quickly as possible, but I don't know whether we are going to go through all of them today. I will do my best anyways. So starting with this one. This milestone is a community request, and the goal of this milestone is to enable very large volume processing for data migration tool. As you could see here in the description, an example that's given where a failure happens is 24,000 verifiable credential documents for a policy, which is a very significant payload there. That's not to say that this should happen. So basically, there are two aspects of this. There's a defect potentially, which led to the failure of the migration tool, which we need to fix. And the second request, that's the request that is not a subject for discussion. What is a subject for discussion here is whether we need to introduce new functionality where migration can be stopped, paused, and restarted from the point where it was paused or stopped for whatever reason, whether error occurred and there is a retry or maybe a manual pausing. So that's for your consideration in terms of priorities, please. Next slide, please, Prina. This as an enhancement for our recently released decentralized Guardian feature, where a remote policy, the remote policy concept is where a policy, the same policy that is hosted and executed is run on this Guardian instance is also deployed on that Guardian instance, and users from that Guardian instance are able to enact actions in on that policy as if they were working on this Guardian instance. So that's a remote decentralized Guardian policy. It's done to enable companies, entities, let's say verifiable credential, sorry, VVBs, not verifiable credentials, but verification and validation bodies, to not have to jump across Guardian instances for validation of projects when they're requested to do. They can connect their home Guardian instance to all these different Guardian instances where their clients prefer to operate, and then approve or reject, review, verify documents that have been submitted. So that's the decentralized Guardian feature. But what happens? So you've got this and that Guardian instance, potentially other Guardian instances there. They're all connected together and operate as a single machine. What we don't have currently is the ability to break that, to disconnect them, and other than like shutting down or not preventing them from cross-connecting, which would be quite drastic. This is an enhancement that would introduce this functionality of disconnecting, disabling, and separating Guardian instances after they've been configured to operate together. Bear in mind, it's not that the instances are somehow linked together, and they still can operate as independent instances for all the policies that are not configured to be a remote policy. So it's just having that disconnection for the parts of their functionality where they act as connected together. Next slide, please, Prina. Yes, ticket is enhancing a user experience for import functionality for schemas. So basically, it's asking for a templated code to be present in the import functionality, so users don't have to write it from scratch. It's a very valid requirement. It's also all of these are community requests, unless I mention otherwise. They are community requests. Guardian reached that stage in evolution now that majority of tickets that we create for your consideration for the next phase, they all have been in one way or another, maybe directly, but sometimes indirectly derived from the community needs. So they are practical needs, and this is a practical need there. And it's common in any industry, in software industry, but even if you write something, an email, there's always a template that you used before or something like that. So you don't have to start completely from scratch. That's optimizes things significantly. And this is the ticket about that. It's to optimize dealing with auto-calculation specification for imported schemas. Next slide, please. Yes. Yes, this is enhancing a UI or UX of the user in such a way that images, which currently can be attached to as evidence or descriptions to documents, Guardian data, they would be visible in the UI directly rather than having to open that as an image separately. I think it would be obviously rendering an image in place where the context for that image is clear from the data that surrounds it in the text or some other data. It would be much more convenient. Once again, it's a request from the community, and clearly it's an enhancement to the UX. So it's for you to assess the priority of that. Please, next slide, please, Priya. Yes. So this is a significant ticket, actually. And I think eventually, maybe in terms of implementation, we will undertake it as maybe two or three different tasks. But it's all focused on the ability to analyze and use data that are more complex, just plain scalar data like numbers. In this particular case, there's not just an array of data, but as a, I don't know if everyone's familiar with the concept of stratus. It's basically a way of grouping data, like maybe an array or a set of data, grouping them into subsets. Yeah, those are called stratas, and usually used in data analytics and various other calculations. These things can be represented as matrices, maybe, or multidimensional arrays in computer science, where one strata is a column, but then there's another column, but all of them are a continuous set of data that can be subject to mathematical expressions or search or other manipulation. At the moment, we don't have a straightforward way of using this, displaying these fields and using them in calculations. And yes, the challenges for that is like the request to address this challenge is in this ticket. Additionally, there is also a request to enable including this data to enable, because for this data obviously it's even more important because it's complex data, to specify an example data which would be helpful for users to for the fields, in particular complex fields like this, like multi-strata schema fields. Next slide, please, Preelam. This is maybe an enhancement that, from a certain point of view, one can address this as a human using tools separate to Guardian, but there's no reason why Guardian could not enhance the experience and validate separately, specifically because it matters for the import whether there are any duplicates or not in the schema and policy, because it's too easy to make a mistake, and the machine should really prevent us from doing anything that can cause difficulties. And this is the enhancing the validation method during import. It's yet another ticket that is connected to the import functionality and specifically for duplicates. Next slide, please, Priam. Yes, this is a ticket slightly different to everything else that we discussed in The Guardian, because it is almost like a meta information about the policy. It doesn't concern the policy itself or the workflow within the policy or anything associated with the policy like imports, export, or anything like that. It's to do with the usage of the policy. So let's imagine within the policy there are maybe 5 or 6 user milestone steps. Let's say approvals, users submitting data, and then maybe validations, and maybe some decisions made at some point. All of these in the same policy, these actions get repeated for pretty much for every project, every sort of stream of data. And for some complex policies, there are many more steps like this. And at the moment, there is no information that's collected in Guardian about how that policy has been used, whether a time period between data submission and then an approval stage was long or short, or how long it was in the first place. It's very difficult to build a business process around this for the companies that deliver services to clients. Usually the ticket mentions SLAs. That's exactly what the kind of information that would be needed to formulate an SLA is like, what's on average, what do we expect this stage to be? So the ticket requests first the statistics collection on this, monitoring what's going on, analysis of the data, the basic analysis, maybe outliers, removing outliers, generating some statements about averages, maybe if we consider that to be Gaussian law distribution, maybe calculating standard deviation and like judging what various other statistical parameters based on that, but providing tooling for users and administrators of Guardian to be able to formulate their commitments and their possible standards of service. Next slide, please, Prina. Yes, an enhancement to the core functionality of Guardian, and it's to do with the evolution of Guardian. Once again, this Guardian has been maturing and the usage has been increasing, and now we're faced, as you've seen, with the duplicates issue, in this particular case, schema versioning issues, because we observe that there are many streams of work on enhancing policies, schemas that continuously happen. And we reach the stage where it's difficult for the policy author, even an individual policy author, to track all the activities that have been done on a particular policy. So this ticket addresses an element of that challenge, and this is specifically about managing versioning of the schema. As you remember that we've got like schemas that can be published, that the schemas that are in development in the draft mode, so schemas, the same schemas that have been imported, which are different schemas. All of this, if we can normalize and link them together so we can present a coherent, easy to understand and track picture to the user of the evolution of a particular schema, that would help managing policy authoring. Next slide, please, Prina. Yeah, this ticket is again about the evolution of the Guardian, but this topic has come up before previously and has been discussed. And the main topic that we discussed about this is whether a schema is linked in, or how much does the schema should be linked to a policy, whether it's a standalone element, a schema published, and there are arguments pro and against. From a certain point of view, schema is the definition of the data structure. So it's meaningful on its own. But on the other hand, data and its structure is only meaningful really in the context of the policy or the intended usage of that data. Otherwise, it's just a collection of numbers, strings, and so on. And because of that, there are certain decisions that have been taken about binding a schema to a policy. But this ticket essentially requires us to reconsider that decision, and together with the versioning, as linked, semantic, logically linked together, we need to create a new standard for Guardian for this, or new approach, or maybe enhance the existing approach where it's clearly defined what and how much binding to the policy a schema has, and whether importing a schema into Guardian in the context of a different policy changes that schema, or whether it's the same schema with the same version and so on, and what it means for data compatibility between Guardian policies and policy versions. Next slide, please, Prina. This is an enhancement, a UX enhancement that seems simple and from a first look, and maybe not that difficult to implement, but we could have absorbed it together into a bigger ticket for UX enhancements. But this is a specific request from the community, and therefore we want to track it separately so we don't miss, and there is a traceability that there's been a request and there's been implementation. Basically, the issue here is that once again, a user can make a mistake and publish policy before it's ready just by accident, or just for whatever reason clicking the wrong button. And this should not be possible, because if you haven't specified the policy version correctly, like, you shouldn't be able to publish erroneously. And at the moment, unfortunately, that's possible. This is what we address with this ticket. Next slide, please, Prina. Yes, we have worked on a major ticket recently, and this ticket is about about producing a record of the activity of a policy in production, as well as it's been possible to do that in dry run for a long time now. But what is possible, and by default is enabled a publication, that an activity on a policy will be fully captured and published together with the policy artifacts that are needed for, like, traditionally as we've got this data, like a stream of data, we call it trust chain of data, where you could see all the significant elements of data and how it evolved and transformed as part of the policy workflow, and leading all the way to, if present, to the minting of the token. So the kind of the reason why the token exists is clearly visible. But what this functionality gives an opportunity to re-execute everything, or view the re-execution of everything fully to get with all the data that's been captured, and you are basically replaying it. What it can also do for you is like you developed a new policy or an enhancement to this policy, a new version, and you'd want to test that the results would still be the same, and that's how you'd replay it. You can replay it on the new version of that policy and see if it's still compatible with the old calculations, for example. However, there's the challenge with this is that we've got selective disclosure for some of the data that's published encrypted. And for this ticket, we need to do the same thing for the input data that translate into that selective disclosure data. So at the moment, the results are encrypted, but the input data are not. So theoretically, if you knew the architecture, and the calculations, you could manually figure out what the selective disclosure data would be, which is not good. Next slide, please, Priya. This is a community request, and it's to do with the integration with the external system. Some time ago, maybe over a year ago, we have implemented a subscription mechanism where a third-party system can subscribe for like internal bus kind of thing, events that signify certain operations. The one that was significant then was token minted events. So an external system can be notified about specific tokens being minted, and then actions can be triggered based on that. But what is required here is to add another event to that token failed, because there are reasons why token minting can fail, for funding, for example, of their operations, which we recently talked about in one of the community meetings. And that needs to be, it seems that certain workflows in third-party systems need to be triggered when that happens. For example, increase the balance on a particular account, so there are fees can be paid in HBARs. And this ticket will address that, generate the token failed event. Next slide, please. Yes. This ticket is the same theme emerges, if you could notice, because we talked about data stratas, multi-strata data. We talked about 24,000 verifiable credential migration, and here is another kind of ticket that is grounded in mostly in scale of data, because it's a particular kind of data. Think of it as a time series data where there's many values, and it mentions hundreds or even thousands, and the generation happens very frequently. The numbers are significant, and at the moment, Guardian can handle this, but it doesn't make it easy for the user to actually understand that data, because data is presented as data, and that's such a large volume of data, it's hard for human mind to analyze. So this ticket is about implementing tooling, like in the UI, that would enable maybe graphical view, maybe like table view, that familiar interface that everyone is comfortable with and used to observe large sets of data, in particular time series data. Next slide, please, Priya. Yes, this is a request from the community, and it is about documentation enhancement. We've got a few other tickets. We want to track them separately as tickets as requested by the community, so we know we've addressed every request from the community, and that hence it's not grouped together. We maybe for work later to organize this, we will create an epic, and we will unite them together. But here specifically, this is a separate issue, and also it's good to be able to prioritize it separately as well. So we're requiring your opinion on priority of this and all the other tickets that we considered today and will consider today. Next slide, please, Priya. Yes, this is once again the documentation ticket. Let me just briefly explain what formula linked definitions are, because we're working on a similar feature now, and this soon will be made available, at least in develop, and in the next release, it's going to be in the release. So formula linked definitions is a feature in Guardian that enables policy authors to represent sections of policy functionality which are to do with calculations, the actual sort of calculations as expressed in PDF methodologies to link it to a graphical representation to that of that calculation in a mathematical notation. So effectively, you have a formula and you link a document, the resulting schema to that formula, showing which specific fields that in the formula map, like variables map to which specific fields in the schema, and what are other data sources for that calculation were, and where that calculation happened, in which calculation block, for example. So that's formula link definitions, but our documentation is describes this and describes how to do them, but perhaps not, it can be enhanced with examples as well as maybe more detailed description of how it works and how to use it in practice. Yeah, where the usability of it is for what and so on. Next slide, please, Prina. This is a very important topic, I think, for all of us. Again, a documentation topic, but it's not just documentation. I'd say it's Guardian UI as well. We have a Guardian system is very powerful and has many features, and we had our strategy so far has been to give names to Guardian features that specifically describe what the things are. And sometimes some of those names maybe sound a bit too technical and they don't map easily directly to the common vocabulary maybe of subject domain. So SMEs coming from the field without any experience in Guardian, there's a little bit of a learning curve to map the concepts that they have to the Guardian concepts. And the challenge with this is they don't map one to one. Policy is not just methodology as specified in policy is slightly different. For example, right, a policy is a methodology with executable methodology and with the like enhancements around the methodology that enable people to follow the workflow and not to make mistakes. It's not the same, but it's similar. So we need to really rethink naming conventions in docs and in the Guardian UI to make it intuitively clear to anyone who is coming from the field, to subject matter experts, the environmental science and the environmental practitioners. Next slide, please. It's a similar documentation ticket about the APIs. Again, the request is to make it more clear. The API documentations we currently have is precise and definitive, but it doesn't like label fields that label generically rather than and maybe lack some detail. It's specific, but it doesn't explain, maybe it doesn't have examples of usage and doesn't explain what the constraints maybe or what the recommended usage for all these fields is, and that's what we can enhance with this ticket. Next slide, please, Prina. Yes, there's actually at the moment there are quite a few AI specific. It's almost like a major initiative for Guardian at the moment is to introduce the AI capabilities, and this is one of those tickets. And that's specifically the ticket that allows to find or at least to propose the initial mapping structure between Guardian schemas and third-party schemas that they have in other systems with which Guardian tend to integrate. At the moment, it has to be done by hand, and it's challenging. So the tool, which in this particular case, it will be a separate tool adjacent to Guardian, which is controlled with convenient but command line. So it's not because this work is actually quite a technical work, and therefore it's suitable for that sort of use. Yeah, that's one ticket. Next slide, please.
Oh, before we go to the next slide, I just wanted to let the community know that this AI ticket and the next upcoming two tickets, these tickets are already been in progress. This we have added. We wanted to discuss, just let you know about these tickets because this has already been added in our roadmap. This is already in progress. So we would be adding this and implementing this definitely in our Guardian, but this has already been done. So we would not be asking these tickets for the prioritization because this is already in progress. Just an FYI.
And yeah, okay. The next ticket in the AI series of tickets is again the same sort of style tool, but which would enable a AI-powered pre-generation of schemas based on the documents. So at the moment, when a policy, one of the first stages in policy digitization, or sorry, methodology digitization, or converting methodology into Guardian policy, is the stage where schemas are defined. An SME would look at the methodology and understand what the data structures would be and then define them by hand in schemas. And it's time consuming a lot. Sometimes it's repetitive and clearly understandable, but there's a lot of 24,000 schemas defined. It's a significant chunk of work and perfect for AI because that kind of thing can be done by the AI if we train it properly. And this ticket is about that, analyzing the methodology and pre-generating kind of proposals for schemas, which can then further be augmented by subject matter expert to map exactly to how he or she sees the policy workflow and data structures. Once they obviously schema represents a document a format later on. There are certain adjustments that can be made because some of those documents are consumed by humans, not machines, and therefore need to be prepared accordingly. So, yeah. But at the initial stage, there's the most difficult step, the most time-consuming step would be handled by AI. So next slide, please. And this is doing a similar style of tool, but the AI power is applied to the search functionality. So at the moment, to find a relevant data or documents, Guardian offers extensive searching functionality, but that searching functionality is based on full text search. Yes, it understands maybe text context. You can search within a field or field name and so on. You can combine search parameters, but it's more like a traditional search. So it's syntactical search. But what we're talking here is a tool that enables to do semantic searching of the documents. And yeah, it's again, AI makes it possible and we should use it. Next slide, please, Prina. Yes. So as Guardian schemas, many Guardian schemas have attributes that map fields in the documents to properties as defined by IWA standards. So what is missing at the moment is the update to that because we as it currently stands, it's compatible with V2, but now there is a V3 of that standard, so we need to upgrade that. Next slide, please, Prina. Yes, this is a this is a ticket to enable end users to participate in the configuration, end users meaning policy users, to participate in the kind of configuration of Guardian when it comes to its interaction with third-party resources, specifically credentials, because some of the services actually require payments, and some of the users may want to pay only they pay for the services that they use by themselves, especially some of them are maybe optional. At the moment, the configuration is embedded into the Guardian. The approach that's been taken is that it is the hosting provider that kind of manages this on behalf of users. But it's been a request from the community to enable the actual project developers and various other users that are in policy to specify their credentials where required their own. Next slide, please, Prina. Yes, this is one of the tickets to do with the kind of enterprise workflow approach from a technical perspective. Most of these systems, when they get rolled out, they are rolled out first, and this happens, I know, in MGS, which is a separate item here, but it is always like any production system. It's first like it's in QA, then it's in UAT, there's pre-production, and only then it gets deployed in production. But every stage, in particular UAT and pre-production, in this environments, the system still needs to be fully operational. But the point is that if that system that's fully operational deals with the production external services, and every time that a test is made, real data is being received from those third-party services, and the payment happens if it's associated with retrieval of that data. And that can be for, like, as we all know, it's better to extensively test your system again before it goes in production. But the more you test, the more you pay to external service provider, which is maybe the external service provider is very happy about that, but the individuals or the companies that pay for it maybe less. So the request here is to enable the kind of dry run, to the not having to reach out, but mimic or maybe remember the requests from before. Once you run this request, the next time it's the same data. It's correctly formatted, but it doesn't trigger the payment that's associated with the requests. Next slide, please. Yes, there are two tickets about the Python libraries. I think the next one will also, I don't know, maybe it's not exactly the next one. So as in the previous iteration, we've implemented support for Python in the calculation block. So previously it was JavaScript. It was requested by the community that we support Python. There was a discussion of what kind of language would be supported. Various alternatives have been discussed, but the community converged on Python as the most appropriate. Now Python is implemented, and the reason why Python was chosen is because it is one of the most powerful languages that's used in data science throughout for data analysis, and the availability of libraries for Python. We made an initial assessment with the help of the community. There's been a community consultation process that was run through Slack and in one of the meetings, and the initial set of libraries had been defined and implemented, built into the Guardian as the feature was delivered. However, now that it's been used a little bit longer, the practitioners have discovered that maybe some libraries are needed but are missing currently, and there's a proposed list here, spatial processing and some general purpose libraries as well. So this ticket is about adding support for these libraries into Guardian as it comes out of the box in the build. Next slide, please, Brina. Okay, that's the next ticket about libraries in Python. Everything I said about Python libraries applies to this ticket as well, except this ticket is about removing libraries that are not needed from that list. But a specific concern, and that's something that's been discussed during the consultation process with the community, is the fact that there is a risk that is introducing the amazing capabilities of Python would also risk making policy non-deterministic. Basically, the same calculation, maybe naive user, maybe perhaps a user not necessarily within the code that's in the Guardian, but maybe within the code in some library, maybe some randomness somehow is used, or local time or something like that is used, and that changes the result of the calculation. And that was always the risk. And now there's been some review and some practice around this, and there are some libraries that have been identified already that maybe not so necessary, and also they're containing this randomness in them that we would like to avoid. So this is a proposal from external to the Guardian team, where we like a proposal to standardize, remove some of the libraries, and review the current list of supported libraries with the eye on removing those that are not needed. Next slide, please, Prina. Yes, this ticket is enhancing documentation, but in this particular case, not the documentation itself, but the UX of the documentation. There are some new capabilities that we use for maintaining documentation has delivered in new releases, and specifically AI capabilities, which can be very convenient for the user because it allows Guardian documentation set has grown significantly because the feature set of Guardian has grown significantly, and it can be quite difficult to navigate it. Even with the search capability that Gitbook offers, it still can be challenging to find the information. But an AI assistant, which Gitbook offers, if we can integrate it specifically, it can be integrated into the Guardian interface itself, and it is context aware as well, hopefully, or at least the claims are. We haven't yet tested it, but they claim that it's the case. That way, a user that is in a particular place in the Guardian is presented with particular, can ask questions in a human language of that assistant, the chatbot assistant, and on the basis of that documentation, the chatbot will provide answers. Good UX, hopefully. Next slide, please, Prina. Yes, this is a ticket. We already discussed an aspect of that, not the same ticket, but again, it's a community request and we keep it as an item here. And it's specific about the ability to input data into Guardian and view them as a table, like Excel table. And it's definitely true that for large data sets, large numerical data sets, a table view is probably the most comprehensible for users. And also a table view would enable us to input data, not manually, but insert it from other table formats input them into this interface rather than inputting by hand, which would also enhance the significantly. Yeah, that's the ticket here. Next slide, please, Prina. Yes, that's this. Yes, another scalability ticket, but from the UX point of view, some of the forms in Guardian, some of the reports in Guardian, which are also forms, they can be quite large, many sections and fields, and yes, they can be grouped into sections, but in order to get into a particular section, you need to scroll and find that section, and even that can be difficult in some of the very large documents that we've used in practice now for the last maybe a year or so, maybe not a year, maybe 6 months or so. In this particular case, that this particular ticket offers a solution to that we need to implement, and the solution would be to add a navigation system of some sort where you can go to a particular section quickly rather than just by scrolling and finding it in the form UI. Next slide, please, Prina. How are we doing for time, Prina? May I ask? I don't see the
We are
clock.
good. We actually, this is like 1.5 hour session, so we are still in the 60 minutes.
Okay, that's good. All right.
Andre, would it make sense to take a break for questions if there are any?
Oh, I think so. Yes. Thank you, Wes. Maybe we'll stop here for the moment and open for questions because there's another set of tickets and yeah, it's better to ask them while they're fresh, hopefully. Any questions from the community? Maybe you've seen your ticket that you've submitted or request that you've submitted to us. Some of the requests come not as tickets as by Slack messages, most of them I'd say, and we then formulate them in tickets. Some of them are actually tickets. And if we, by any chance, misrepresented or maybe skipped something or whatever, or maybe enhanced your request, please let us know.
One other item I'd say is this is the regular promotion of the Community Bounty Program. Some of these tickets are possible for community members to help contribute to open source. We have gotten a series of open source community contributions in this quarter. So one, for example, was the retirement of tokens related to management by standards or registries by Zeptagon, and that was recently just awarded. But we've also gotten others as well over the past few months. That program is fully funded, and we look to make a series of awards each quarter. So if you do see a bug, please report it and please fix it, and that'll help you get a community bounty. But also if you say, hey, I want to contribute to a feature or propose a feature that you need for your business, that's also a good way to contribute.
Okay, if there are no questions, we can proceed further. And yeah, there'll hopefully be time at the end also to ask questions. So if you didn't formulate it now, yeah, there's still a chance later, no worries. Shall I proceed, Prina?
Yeah.
All right, thank you. This ticket is to do with the usability of the current UI, and it's to do with the approach that the Guardian UI takes when it displays sort of action or additional information that's related to the information, to keep the context of the information and give the user sort of ability to operate. It's usually displayed as a pop-up. But the problem with that is that the pop-up it doesn't seem to, I think it's not said here, but I've experimented with that. It doesn't scale, maybe even with the scale of your real estate on your monitor. And we've got quite complex data sets now with like several hierarchical levels sometimes. And then certain things need to be displayed side by side, for example, for comparison, for finding data sources when we were talking about FLDs earlier, formula link definitions. So it's used in many places, and it makes it difficult, not maybe unnecessarily awkward to operate this. So this ticket is about enhancing that experience and enabling users like using the real estate of the monitor or the screen that users have, and maybe the zoom as well to enable a convenient UI for such things. Next slide, please. And remember, we had a similar ticket, but it's a separate request from the community, and it's slightly separate angle on that. And it's similar to both of the tickets that we discussed on the topic. First, the ability to enter data as tables, which obviously implies you should be able to see them as tables. But also we had this complex multi-dimensional data sets earlier in there, which is also potentially can be solved with table, but there's a better solution there. Obviously, there's charts. The various charts are usually used for such data sets as well, but they also often are mapped into tables. So in this specifically this ticket specifically talks about data display and a kind of summary for these kind of data sets in the table format. Next slide, please. Yes, so that remember we had a similar ticket again. It's a separate request from the community, so we are tracking it as such, so to make sure we address this. But there was a ticket about publishing in this particular case as well about a document. It's again a button that shouldn't be pressed because there was the publishing and wrong version, if you remember, policy wrong version. But this particular case is also adding a document that's hasn't been finished or shouldn't be added for other reasons accidentally, and then obviously it's done and it's published. So there's, even though it's a recovery, or sometimes it fails because there's some issue with the document, but we got to look at it throughout the UI, make sure user actions that are inappropriate for the state of the document or the context, they should not be possible from the UI. Next slide, please. We are using the term relay here still, but obviously this term is going to change. This is an enhancement to the relay functionality, or relay accounts functionality, or pair accounts functionality, let me call it that way now. At the moment, pair accounts can be specified by the user. So a policy author says, so this kind of identifies a block in the policy which represents the beginning of the project workflow. And at that point, a user then, when the policy is deployed, a policy user can specify which wallet or project account will be used to fund the operations that Guardian performs through Hedera. And that is only done if administrator or policy author said it's going to be done that way. But what is not possible currently is to mandate that the user must use the particular project account or to generate. It still requires a user action on this. And this ticket says that for some context, it's not appropriate, and we would need to develop a way to mandate the use of specific project accounts and make it completely transparent to the user. So the project developer, let's say, who is working through the policy workflow, would not even know what's happening. There's some accounts that are paid, somehow financed, and so on. And at the moment, that facility doesn't exist, and it doesn't exist because it's to do with finances, a real finances, if it's deployed in production, meaning the accounts that are specified needs to be funded, the funding needs to be managed it needs to be topped up, the balance needs to be monitored, and like various accounting things need to happen, obviously, if it's a business and the money is being spent, and therefore we make sure that it's prominent and visible. And these two things, we don't know the solution yet. It's the request to reconcile these two things, make it mandatory, but also make it visible and whatever. But how to do it, we will have to figure out. But what we are asking here is the priority. How important is this ticket, this functionality for you? And next slide, please, Prina. We have a Guardian supports a disaster recovery functionality where data that's been published is accessible again, it's never lost, and all required information can be restored from immutable places. However, what's not possible is to restore it to the extent that the policy state is restored. For example, something's been half done and the disaster occurred. And bear in mind, by disaster, we mean like a data center disappeared, tsunami kind of flooding happened and stuff like that. And then like the data center and the backups disappeared, everything. It's just, we just have hedera network and IPFS, nothing else. Then a Guardian instance can be built, and that's what we define. It's the disaster recovery procedure. And then this from hedera and IPFS, things sucked into the Guardian again, and all the information is available. What's not possible is to restart that sort of it was in the middle of something, and you sucked it all in, and then restart it from that point. That's not possible currently. But the ticket says we want this. The question is, how much of a priority is it for you? So comment, please. Next slide, please, Freedom. This is enhancing the UX of API. At the moment, is everything that Guardian does in the UI is exposed via API and documented in Guardian documentation. We've seen some tickets to do with enhancement of Guardian documentation, and one specifically was about API documentation. But this is enhancing the API itself, because at the moment the granularity of the API is quite low. It's very precise. So to, let's say, execute a business action, like the concept, a business concept, you'd need to like several API calls usually. And that may not be the best way to do that for some of the common operations that most of the users of Guardian do via the API. So it should be possible to group those API calls into a more kind of business level API concepts. And for some users, let's say 80%, if we aggregate 20% of API calls like that, but most important ones that 80% of users use, that would be a significant UX enhancement. Once again, it's for your consideration with regard to priorities. Next slide, please. Yes, there was a ticket, as you remember, about enhancing Guardian documentation with standardizing methodology and Guardian UI as well. But this ticket takes it further. Not just the Guardian terminology that is enhanced, but that terminology is abstracted away in terms of Guardian code structure. So it's taken into a dictionary, maybe files somewhere in Guardian, and then the Guardian build uses them to like in the UI, and that would enable us to do many things. If we were to do that, then introducing new terms would be easier because we put it in there and then we reuse them across Guardian. So like even across Guardian is going to be standardized because it's all used from the same dictionary. Secondly, we could do spell check and the various grammar checks and so on Guardian. But most importantly, it would be quite easy for us to then, if we ever wanted to translate Guardian UI into another language, because we've got all the terms in the dictionary, and we can develop multiple dictionaries for different languages, and then you can either build Guardians with different UI languages, or maybe even switch dynamically in the UI as well. That would be even better. But precondition for that all is creating that dictionary, which is this ticket. Next slide, please. Yes. As Guardian, we had two stages maybe of Guardian evolution already, and that's the kind of third stage, the enhancement for the retirement operation. Initially, we rely on certain functionality in hedera, but hedera evolved, and that functionality became not the best way of doing the retirement. So we transitioned retirement operations and token ownership into contract based. So there's more bigger part of Guardian is on hedera and executed as smart contracts. But there are certain things that are associated with certain read operations in hedera associated with payments. And for that, we avoided making them automatic because or at least there may be a better way of doing that. At the time, it was not clear, but the straightforward, the immediate approach required payments, and we decided not to subject users to that because it can be confusing, and we get many support requests where the issue was an account balance was zero, and therefore an operation couldn't take place. And then this would have confused anything. Plus, there are other things. It's just one of the things that can be done to find a way to update Guardian information from hedera without explicit manual refresh action on the UI. And the reason why that needs to happen is that this functionality is in smart contracts. Guardian uses smart contracts to execute it, but it was deliberately put into smart contracts so third-party systems equally can use it if they're authorized can execute these operations, retirement operations specifically, matching operations. So this token will be only can be retired with this token. And that the matchmaking of tokens can happen outside Guardian. It doesn't have to happen in Guardian because of the smart contracts. But because that can happen, the state of the smart contract can change, and Guardian instances would never know. So that's why the refresh is required. But the refresh at the moment is manual, which is probably not the best way to do that. You'd want to always have an up-to-date information automatically. This ticket is to do that, and a few other items there. Next slide, please, Prina. Yes, so this ticket is about in creating a using hedera functionality to generate proofs of operations that can be evaluated or verified, cryptographically confirmed in isolation by their own. It's almost like a digital certificate from a verifiable digital certificate from hedera about an operation taking place or about a token minted and so on, which can be used as evidence, maybe submitted in audit reports and so on. The stick is about introducing that support for that into Guardian. Next slide, please, Prina. This is to do with API improvements. At the moment, some operations, an API call in Guardian and a Guardian policy can result in a cascade of operations, a whole chain of blocks executed, various operations that maybe even users would be required to click a button to execute and return or generate the result. For that reason, these operations are synchronous at the moment by default, but some applications and some third-party systems that integrate with Guardian would prefer have it synchronous, even if it means waiting for a while. So it knows that when the request comes in, things have happened, and then the action can be taken in that third-party system. So this ticket is about introducing support for synchronous operation, or for the choice, basically. So the third-party system can say, I want to execute this API call synchronously, and then it would be synchronously, or maybe having an equivalent API call that would be synchronous, so it would call that rather than the asynchronous version. Next slide, please, Prina. As we've got quite a few sections in Guardian UI and together with Indexer where visualization in terms of a tree kind of diagram happens. We've got statistics, we've got formula link definitions, we've got what else? We've got schema tree. However, this particular functionality, this particular ticket requests the ability to export that diagram, not view it within the Guardian UI as it is now, but to be able to export that diagram in a UML format that's compatible with other systems. So then, let's say, It can be imported into another system and used as part of maybe architecture diagram or something like that for maybe documentation or something like that. It's about the ability to export data from Guardian, and in this particular case, it's not data themselves, it's the data structure and the relationship diagram. Next slide, please, Prina. Yes, so Guardian, as we discussed previously, about semantic search, but this is about the diff and a search that is traditional syntactical. It's not quite strictly speaking syntactical, mostly syntactical, but it also has some rules. It understands sections and understands patterns and so on currently. But anyway, this is about enhancing that diff and search functionality to enable it to disregard the differences in sort of data ordering and various other structures. It's a one step further to semantic search. Is the ability, so if you've got a data structure that contains the same fields, but they are messed up altogether, it's very difficult for a straightforward text comparison system to figure out that it's the same text or the same structure. It would, but it's not impossible. Naive implementation would just show them as completely different. Guardian doesn't show them as completely different. It does find matches and similarities, but sometimes it doesn't like account for some other things. So it's not perfect. And this is about making it better. Also, there's ordering, and I think there is another ticket about difference in capitalization and so on in the terminology that's used as well. And in fact, I think that's been done now. So there's no ticket like that. There was a ticket, but we've done that. Next slide, please, Priya. Yes. Yes. So this is again a user clicking the wrong button. In this case, the button does need to be enabled, but if a user makes the wrong selection, in this particular case, selected the wrong role, then it's not possible to go back and deselect it and change it. And that's probably true for many other operations in Guardian that should really be recoverable from. The only operation that's definitive is when the document is published. When it's saved and published, then because it's published and goes immutable, we still, although we have a caveat that we're working at the moment on as the updatability of the fields of the published documents, some fields that are not meaningful in terms of calculations, but they just address, for example, and so on, can be designated by the author as updatable, and that document, even though it's published, you can republish the revision of the document. But this ticket is different. There are other operations that should be recoverable, including the operation of selecting a role. You should be able to go back and forth, and this at the moment it's not possible. This ticket requires us to change that. Next slide, please, Prina.
Okay, I will now give a pause, Andre. Thank you so much, Andre, for your effort in explanation. So I just wanted to give you a quick insight of what is the next steps for the community to help us out in the prioritization. So basically, this would be an Excel sheet which I'll be circulating on Slack, on all the social media channels, just to get your priority. We would just need your help in this, where as you see that you would be having this editability access where you can actually add your name, your like company's name, and then if you are already in this, feel free to just update the previous priorities which we have already got. We have added that as well. If you want to again change your previous priority, feel free to do that. Or if you want to add, so these are the new tickets which we have come across from the last page to this page. So I have added that in the start of the sheet so that you can start looking at the new and then come back to the older ones. But definitely, if your priority is higher for the older tickets, we are happy to take that as well. But make sure that if you want to add your priority, feel free to please add your organization name in the respective column, and then when do you need that to be released, and then the comments, if you have any external comments, feel free to please update this. And what we would be also doing is we are still left with our another batch of milestones, which is from 42 from 42 to 90. We would be continuing that in the month of January, having next week as a holiday week. We would just not bother you guys to join this in the next week. We would be moving that to January. So we are actually planning to do our next part of our roadmap planning on January 7th, which is again Wednesday, same time, 8 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. We would be sending you a revised announcement in our Slack channels and everywhere like LinkedIn and all the social media where you should be able to register for the next part of the roadmap, and so that we can discuss our next batch of the milestones. And again, the same Excel sheet would be applicable for you guys to add priorities to the ones which we'll be discussing. But again, I would be releasing this soon in our Slack channel, probably today or maximum tomorrow. So please feel free to please let us know if you have any issues in adding your or accessing this sheet and adding your priority. If you have any questions on any of the feature what we have discussed, feel free to please reach out to us on Slack or email. We would be happy to clarify all the questions before you prioritize it. And in addition to this, if you have any other new feature which you have in your mind which needs to be prioritized, feel free to again create a ticket on the GitHub repo and let us know so that we can discuss more further on that and more complexities, more effort and whatnot regarding that ticket, and then plan ahead if that is a priority for you guys. And last but not the least, as Wes already mentioned regarding the bounty or the contribution, if you are interested in Guardian, feel free to do that as well. Just let us know that, hey, we would be happy to contribute in this particular feature or a bug. Please let us know so that we are happy for you to contribute in Guardian so that we get more contributions and then you would be awarded as required. So that's about it. I will be sharing this recording soon in our YouTube channel, which is Envision Blockchain, where you can actually again look at these milestones. If you have any questions, if you have any clarification needed, feel free to let us know. But yeah, that's about it. Please be on a lookout for our part 2 roadmap announcement so that you can register. Just wanted to let you know that when we have these roadmap meetings, a tech meet link would not be applicable because we would all be in this meeting and you would be just alone in that meeting. So just make sure that whenever there is a roadmap meeting, again, part 2, which is January 7th, we would be having a new link as like this, not the tech meet, which we do it every week. So that's about it. Thank you so much for joining, guys. Have a great day ahead, and thank you so much for your time and for listening us and looking for your priorities. Thank you. Have a great day.